Lesson 5. Introduction to Nutritional Science. 5.1. What constitutes nutrition? Definitions and concepts. 5.2. Food is an element of nutrition. 5.3. Physiological criteria foods must meet. 5.4. Non-food nutritional factors. 5.5. Discussion of conventional nutritional teachings. 5.6. Discussion of human eating habits the world over. 5.7. Negative nutrition, harmful foods and practices. 5.8. A survey of unconventional dietetic schools and their fallacies. 5.9. The physiological necessity of proper food combining. 5.10. Nutritional miscellany. 5.1. What constitutes nutrition? Definitions and concepts. 5.1.1. Nutrition is the sum of all processes that promote growth and function. 5.1.2. Nutrition is modified by the entire spectrum of life conditions and activities. 5.1.3. Nutrition involves the processes of growth, development, supply, and invigoration. Conventional attitudes regard nutrition as being almost exclusively involved with foods and feeding, but this is only one facet of the nutritional scene, albeit an important one. At the onset, it is prudent to define what nutrition is and, in view of the many misconceptions, what nutrition is not. 5.1.1. Nutrition is the sum of all processes that promote growth and function. Nutrition does not mean food only. Nutrition is the sum of all the processes that supply, develop, and sustain an organism's faculties and functions at the optimal level of existence. In short, nutrition is the total of all that supplies life's needs. It embraces all requirements for perfect health, and supplying these requirements constitutes nutrition. 5.1.2. Nutrition is modified by the entire spectrum of life conditions and activities. The sum of the nutritional processes adds up to our health quotient. That is, our state of health equals the total of the nutritional processes that created it. Anything that modifies nutrition or the processes of supply and usage also modifies health. Everything we get involved in or do in all spheres of life affects in some way our nutritive disposition, either for the better, for the worse, or equivalently. With respect to foods and feeding, we have specific adaptations for acquiring and processing particular foods to meet our nutritive needs. Anything that changes in the whole process affects our nutrition and, consequently, our health. Because of its importance, we re-emphasize nutrition is largely dependent upon the health, and likewise, our health is dependent on nutrition. 5.1.3. Nutrition involves the processes of growth, development, supply, and invigoration. Dr. Herbert M. Shelton has defined nutrition as follows. Perfect nutrition is dependent on perfect organs, perfect function, and normal health. Each is dependent upon and grows out of the other. All processes and functions are independent and interact harmoniously for mutual well-being. They cannot be taken apart and categorized. Every aspect of life is but a part of a unified whole. This idea of interdependence and interaction leads to the principle that the appropriate way to recover and develop strength and vigor is through the activities and processes that give rise to growth. We recover and develop strength and vigor in the same way that we keep well, in the same way that a babe grows into vigor and adulthood. The powers and forces that brought us into being, that sustain us in existence, that cause us to grow through all the phases of life to manhood and womanhood, are sufficient to restore us if health becomes impaired. 5.2. Food is an element of nutrition. 5.2.1. Food is an inert substance, merely raw materials. 5.2.2. Food use is subject to the body's ability to process, appropriate, assimilate, metabolize, and eliminate. 5.2.3. Food is but one of the many needs in nutrition. As stated earlier, food constitutes only a part of the needs of life. It constitutes some of the raw materials which become part of the overall nutritive processes. When the body receives food, it breaks it down mechanically and chemically into components which can be absorbed and synthesized by the organism into special substances to meet the special needs of the organism. 5.2.1. Food is an inert substance, merely raw materials. Many people believe that foods have different actions in the body. However, this is erroneous. Foods do not act in the body, but are instead acted upon by the body. To be appropriated, the food must lose all its character. It is mechanically crushed, comminuted, and mixed with digestive fluids, then chemically reduced to basic components for absorption, synthesis, and use. Let us again review nutrition as Dr. Shelton has expressed it in yet another definition. Nutrition is a vital process carried on only by a living organism. It is a process of growth, development, and invigoration. To eat good food and enough of it, to drink pure water and breathe pure air, in and of themselves, are very desirable, but something more is needed in order to acquire health, strength, and vigor. Nutrition is dependent on function. We can have better nutritive function only when we have a capacity for better nutrition. Food is of value only in its physiological connections with air, water, sunshine, rest and sleep, exercise or activity, cleanliness, and wholesome mental and moral influences. In short, all the natural or normal circumstances which we know to be necessary for the preservation of health. What Dr. Shelton is saying is but a reiteration of what has been emphasized here, that the better your health, the better will be your nutrition, and the better your nutrition, the better will be your health. Every factor and condition of life must be supplied optimally to assure best health. Again, to highlight its importance, we repeat that food does not use the body or do anything to the body. The body does unto the food and uses it. In creating foods, plant life designed them to be utilized by animals in exchange for a service to the plant. This is symbiosis. Human service to plants is the incidental broadcast of their seeds. Was ever a reward so great for such a small service? As a nutritionist, you must ever keep this in mind. Foods do nothing in the body. They have no powers of cleansing, healing, or anything else. Foods have no will or purpose of their own. To be consumed and used is their inherent design. 5.2.2. Food use is subject to the body's ability to process, appropriate, assimilate, metabolize, and eliminate. A body that is impaired is unable to properly process and use food. To the extent that the impairment causes withdrawal or functional energies from digestive processes, the body is unable to be fed. When the body's nutritive functions are in any way impaired, and this will usually be evidenced by depressed or lost appetite, make this a standing rule. Do not partake of food. Guide clients away from food. Missing a meal or a few meals is most constructive. If the body is in any abnormal condition, food should not be taken or given. In fever, pain, emotional upset, fatigue, worry, sleeplessness, and many other conditions, the body is unable to muster the needed energies for the processes of digestion, appropriation, and assimilation. In such conditions, the body does not create the condition of hunger or give rise to appetency. 5.2.3 Food is but one of the many needs in nutrition. Our capacity to receive, process, and assimilate food is necessary to the nutritive process. In the absence of functional energies in these areas, feeding results in lowered body energies and the waste of foodstuffs. It is passed on to the bowels, and the body is worse off for it. To appropriately receive, digest, and assimilate foods, other physiological needs must also be present. Oxygen, water, digestive fluids, nerve energy, and a multitude of other factors and influences must favorably coalesce to affect these processes. Should any impairment in the nutritive faculties exist, the interference may prove insurmountable and result in indigestion. This leads to the inescapable conclusion, which you must ever bear in mind: proper nutrition is dependent upon and is affected by the entire spectrum of the organism's activities and conditions. 5.3 Physiological criteria foods must meet. 5.3.1 Food adaptations of various species. 5.3.2 Range of food processing capabilities. 5.3.3 Food adaptations of humans. 5.3.4 The dietary requirements that determine our ideal foods. Every creature in nature has become adapted to securing and nourishing itself on particular foods. All natural equipment and faculties dispose to this specialization. Humans are not exceptions to this rule. Because we have developed tools using our capabilities and can supply ourselves with an abundance of anything on earth, as food does not in any way alter our physiological adaptations and specializations. Every creature has basic nutritive requirements. Our biology books detail these rather impartially and correctly for animals, but the books and teachings that concern human nutrition do not deal impartially with the subject. Our educational establishment is the captive of our mammoth industrial complex. This means they prostitute their teachings to cater to the needs of those whose grants support them. Thus, human nutrition as taught in our society is dictated not by physiological faculties and needs, but by the wishes of those food industries that stand to gain from the miseducation that panders to their products. 5.3.1 Food adaptations of various species. The food specializations of various species are categorized by general designation. Some of these categories are as follows: herbivores, grass and vegetable eaters such as cattle, sheep, goats, deer, horses, rabbits, etc. Grainivores, animals that subsist on grains, birds primarily. Insectivores, bats, birds, and creatures that subsist on insects. frugivores, fruit-eating animals, primates and arthropods, humans, orangutans, apes, monkeys, etc. Carnivores, animals that live on the flesh, bone, offal, etc. of other animals. Cats, dogs, lions, tigers, wolves, buzzards, hawks, eagles, jackals, etc. Omnivores, animals such as swine, pigs, and hogs, that live off a mixed diet of fruits, vegetables, grains, flesh, offal, etc. As you're aware, the bee lives on the nectar of blossoms and flowers and the pollen with which it becomes incidentally contaminated. All the bee's equipment befit it to seek out flowers, land upon or hover over them, withdraw nectar the flower has secreted, especially for the bee, and to return to its hive where it shares its harvest with other bees, the surplus being stored as honey. The bee is excellently equipped to meet its needs amply in this manner. Humans cannot meet their needs in this way, neither can cattle, horses, or pigs. They're equipped to their own special ways to meet the needs of their adaptations. As a sidelight on the symbiotic relationship of life, we might note that the flower created the nectar for the bee in exchange for a service. The flower or blossom is a step in the plant's creation of seeds. Before a seed can be formed, fertilization must take place, and to ensure this fertilization, the bee is enticed by nectar. Incidentally to the taking of nectar, the bee contaminates itself with pollen. At the next flower, the bee contaminates the flower's pistil with this pollen. This incidental fertilization is the service the plant induced the bee to perform with the nectar secretion. Who said plants weren't smart? 5.3.2 Range of food processing capabilities. Humans are endowed with certain natural capabilities and limitations in the acquisition, processing, and utilization of foods. Human development, which endowed us with our faculties and capabilities, specialized and restricted our equipment and capabilities for food gathering and processing to certain foods, just as in the case of other animals. The faculties of most creatures are developed so as to make disposition of surpluses or to survive scarcities. Surpluses are either stored as reserves or are excreted. Redundancies beyond needs and ability to readily excrete founder humans and other animals that are so unwise as to overeat. In ascertaining the criteria that a food must have to satisfy human needs, we must be cognizant of the capacities and capabilities of the organism as well as the properties of the food. 5.3.3 Food adaptations of humans. Humans are classified as frugivores because they have the equipment to harvest and efficiently process only a class of food called fruits. Humans are not alone in this class. For millions of years, humans subsisted solely, exclusively, and only on fruits. That is the way it was expressed by Dr. Alan Walker of Johns Hopkins University, an anthropologist who conducted extensive research into the dietary background of humans. Even though humans have eaten foods outside their dietary adaptations off and on for perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, and have eaten some cooked foods for tens of thousands of years, there has been no physiological change that would justify straying from our natural dietary. Our adaptations are strictly as fruit eaters, as you will see in subsequent lessons. 5.3.4 The dietary requirements that determine our ideal foods. Natural foods for humans must satisfy the following criteria and nutrient needs. Foods must be non-toxic. First and foremost, the food must be toxin-free. None of the compounds and substances in the food should present a digestive problem. The body must have enzymes adapted to handle every substance within the food. Toxic substances are those which the body cannot use as food. Substances that the body cannot use but which it cannot prevent absorption of, as in alcohol, cholesterol, drugs, etc., are toxic. Foods must be edible in the raw state. The food must be edible in its living or raw state, as nature delivers it up to us as food. If we cannot eat our fill of a food in its raw state with relish and make a meal of it that meets all or most of our nutrient needs, then it is not a natural food for humans and should be shunned in favor of foods that do. Foods must have sensory appeal. Foods of our adaptation have great sensory appeal. They are a delight to the eye. Their aromas tantalize the sense of smell, and their substance is an unqualified gustatory delight. Foods must be digested easily when eaten alone or properly combined. Foods of human adaptation undergo practically no digestion in the stomach, and humans can absorb the chyme and chyle of their natural foods with very little chemical elaboration in the stomach and small intestine. Foods must be digested efficiently. While ease of digestion necessarily also implies efficiency of digestion, this entry relates to other aspects of efficiency. That which is eaten represents a certain amount of energy potential. To derive this energy from food, the body must expend energy to obtain it. The ratio of energy obtained relative to energy expenditure determines the ratio of efficiency. For instance, we spend a mere 30 calories of energy in the process of appropriation, chewing, absorbing, transporting, and assimilating 400 calories of watermelon. On the other hand, we may spend 280 calories in the digesting of meat to obtain 400 calories. The efficiency with which we handle foods with monosaccharides versus the inefficiency with which we handle protein foods indicates most emphatically the types of food to which we are naturally adapted. In processing food for use, we expend metabolic energy, which is the chemical and mechanical energies expanded, and we expend nerve energy. For instance, we use very little nerve energy in digesting watermelon, but in processing foods to which we are not biologically adapted, an enormous expenditure of nerve energy is occasioned. Meats may cause nervous exhaustion due to the body's frenzied activities in dealing with proteins, uric acid, and other toxic substances in them. Though we may feel exhilarated while expending nervous energy, just as we feel a pick-me-up when taking coffee, which really drains nerve energy, the stimulation occasioned by eating unsuitable foods, such as meat, is an indication of the inefficiency with which the body handles it. Foods must have protein adequacy. Our natural foods must supply us with our protein requirements of about 25 grams daily. The less protein eaten down to the point of adequacy, the better. Protein is taken into the body for replenishing amino acid components needed for a multitude of applications. There are three things you should keep in mind relative to protein digestion. 1. The body can recycle up to 2/3 of its proteinaceous wastes to meet its needs. 2. Protein digestion requires an expenditure of energy equivalent to about 70% of its total caloric content. And 3. Neutralization and elimination of the toxins of protein degeneration putrefaction, uses up vast amounts of nerve energy, which, though stimulating at the time, exhausts and debilitates the body. We must not feel compelled to eat protein foods as such in order to achieve protein adequacy. Almost every food natural to humans has about 4% protein dry weight, an ample amount to supply our needs. Further, most of our natural food contains the amino acids we need. Foods must be adequate in vitamin content. Some 30 vitamins have been determined to be needed in various quantities in the human diet. The vitamins must be in the diet in an organic context, with other nutrients to be useful. Foods must be adequate in mineral salts. Our only source of the minerals of life is from food. Only in food are they in the organic context which can be used. Under no circumstances can the body make use of inorganic materials as might be ingested with water, supplements, or powdered rock, as with dolomite. Natural foods must supply our needs for essential fatty acids. Those food factors which the body requires but cannot itself synthesize are said to be essential. The essential fatty acids are linoleic, linolenic, and arachidonic. Essential fatty acids are unsaturated fats. They occur in practically every fruit, nut, seed, and vegetable in ample quantities to supply human needs. Natural foods must supply our needs for caloric values. The energy we expend must be derived from our food intake. The foods which most sufficiently and easily supply our caloric needs are those with high monosaccharide content. Sweet fruits are at the top of the list in meeting these requisites. Natural foods are water sufficient to meet our needs in most cases. Foods to which we are biologically adapted normally meet all our water needs. This is obvious, for we have no water drinking facilities other than suction, which is necessary for swallowing food. Fruitarian species normally do not drink water. Natural foods are alkaline in metabolic reaction. We require foods that are alkaline or base-forming when metabolized. Almost every food of our adaptation is base-forming, even if it has an acid pH in its natural state. Should we eat any acid-forming food, such as nuts, they should be offset at the same meal with alkaline-forming foods, such as green leaves or other vegetable fare. These are the criteria or requirements for foods that are natural to the human dietary. Only fruits, and especially sugar-containing fruits, meet all these needs ideally. Nothing else meets all these requirements. As further lessons will demonstrate, the requisites of life can be amply met on a totally fruitarian regime. 5.4. Non-food nutritional factors. The first part of this lesson has emphasized the great breadth of the nutritional scope and perspective. This introduction is but a preview of some nutritional factors. In-depth treatment is given to most aspects of nutrition in subsequent lessons. Among the non-food nutritional factors are the following: sunlight and natural light, fresh air and the oxygen it supplies, pure water, exercise, play, and recreation, rest and relaxation, sleep, emotional poise, other requisites of life, general body conditions. Inasmuch as you've already had a glimpse of 19 essential factors and influences for great health in a previous lesson, and they include the above, the details will not be repeated here. You may refer back to lessons 3 and 4 if necessary. The above listing is to emphasize the great dependence of proper nutrition upon the needs of the body, besides food, being appropriately met. Nutrition does not occur in a vacuum. It is not an independent process. It involves the organism in every aspect of its being. 5.5 Discussion of conventional nutritional teachings. 5.5.1 Do RDAs represent our actual needs? 5.5.2 The concepts of the basic 4 food groups. 5.5.3 Eating practices of Americans. As perhaps you know or may have long suspected, and as was stated earlier in the lesson, conventional nutritional teachings are distorted to accommodate the food industries that dominate America. In fact, these distortions and fabrications predominate not only in America, but also in most of the Western world. If we follow conventional nutrition, we are bound to end up with malnutrition and toxemia, and the pathologies they lead to. As life science serves no commercial masters, it has no interest to be served in teaching you false concepts. Further, we do have the benefit of knowing the truth. With respect to conventional nutritionists, it might be said that it is better to be ignorant than to know so much that isn't so. 5.5.1 Do RDAs represent our actual needs? The recommended dietary allowance of the Food and Nutrition Board of the National Research Council reflect the many fallacies to which a wrong philosophy of nutrition leads. First, the RDAs are educated estimates and are sometimes revised upwards or downwards in view of new findings. Second, the board has been very liberal in its allowances. In almost every case, the allowance or suggested daily intake is 2 to 10 times the amount needed by healthy persons. Likewise, they are far in excess of the needs of unhealthy persons, for unhealthy persons usually have impaired nutritive faculties, do not function as efficiently as do healthy individuals, and should have a physiological rest in the form of a fast. Third, the allowances are based on conventional diets which are comprised largely of cooked foods. Not only are cooked foods so deranged that a substantial portion of their nutrients are not usable, but they so vitiate the nutritive faculties as to impair them and lower their efficiency. Healthy individuals eating a raw diet of proper foods have highly efficient nutritive faculties and thrive on a fraction of the intake of which the RDAs are based for conventional eaters. 5.5.2 The concepts of the basic 4 food groups. The pathology and suffering resulting from the abominable nutritional concept of the 4 basic food groups is a national disaster. This concept and its promotion stems from a national policy of catering to industrial behemoths rather than to the welfare of consumers. While today's food industries are outgrowths of incorrect eating going back into the past, the justification for them is relatively recent in origin. The concept has been to acclaim as science the eating of foods that cover not human needs, but the gamut of food produced by powerful food interests. The basic 4 food groups are as follows. 1. The milk group, which includes milk and all milk products. 2. The meat group, which includes meat, eggs, fish, legumes, and nuts. 3. The bread cereal group, which includes grains and grain products. 4. The fruit vegetable group, which includes all fruit and vegetable fare excepting nuts and legumes, which are in the meat group because of their protein content. Eating specified amounts from each of these groups daily is proclaimed balanced nutrition. In truth, it is a balanced market for the commercial food interests that share the food market. The selection of foods in the typical American diet has nothing to do with meeting human needs. The typical American diet is gravely pathogenic and is mostly responsible for our deplorable diseased population. In subsequent lessons, you'll learn why milk and all milk products are unfit for human consumption and the physiological grounds for this unfitness. You'll also learn why all meats, eggs, fish, and legumes, except sprouted, should be rejected as items of diet. Additionally, the relative unsuitability of grains and grain products compared with fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds in the diet will be highlighted. Bread, cereals, and other starchy foods, if included in the diet, are a far less than ideal part of the diet. To comment on Group 4, we point out that some vegetables can be added to the human diet with benefit, though their rich content of nutrients is really unneeded if we partake liberally of fresh raw fruits and abstain from eating unwholesome foods. Tubers, such as potatoes, constitute a large portion of the vegetable intake in America. Inasmuch as most tubers are cooked to make them palatable, the cooking significantly lowers the nutritive value of the food. They, like cereal grains, are less than ideal as foods. In addition, many other vegetables such as onions, garlic, radishes, spinach, and others contain toxic substances such as mustard oil in onions and garlic and oxalic acid in spinach that make them unsuitable as foods. So, while certain vegetables such as lettuce, celery, broccoli, cabbage, and others may supply nutrient insurance, many, if not most, vegetables have liabilities that make them less than ideal, even undesirable as foods. Besides, we can obtain most, if not all, the nutrients we need from fresh, ripe fruits, especially if we also include the non-sweet fruits, often so-called vegetables, such as tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, etc., plus a few nuts and seeds in our diet of fresh fruits. It bears reiterating that the items of diet to which we are not biologically adapted are, to some degree, pathogenic. Subsequent lessons will probe the ill effects of wrong diet in greater depth. 5.5.3 Eating Practices of Americans. Most of us are keenly aware of American eating practices. A typical breakfast may include every member of our 4 basic food groups. The typical American breakfast usually includes from the meat group ham, bacon, and sausages and eggs, from the grain or cereal group bread, toasted or untoasted, and or some pastry or perhaps a donut, and a bowl full of cereal. From the fruit and vegetable group may be an appetizer in the form of grapefruit, an orange juice, or cantaloupe. Also from this group may be some fried potatoes and possibly banana or other fruit on top of the cereal. From the milk group, there is usually milk for cereal, cream for the coffee, butter for the toast, and perhaps a glass of milk on the side. Sugar, salt, pepper, and other sweeteners and condiments may be added. An American lunch usually includes a meat dish with servings of vegetables, tubers, or grains on the side. It usually includes bread and may include milk, ice cream, butter, and other dairy products. An American dinner is not substantially different from an American lunch, except there's usually more of it. The typical American diet is heavy on members of the four food groups promoted in America as nutritious fare. There has not been in all history more pathogenic fare than this. 5.6 Discussion of human eating habits the world over. 5.6.1 The origins of paradises and Edens. 5.6.2 The origins of today's eating practices. 5.6.3 A look at some diets over the world. 5.6.4 Do different dietary habits change human physiology? Diets vary widely over the face of the globe. We have the Lapps and the Eskimos who live pretty much as carnivores on one end of the spectrum, and we have groups of people in the equatorial regions who live as almost total fruitarians at the other end of the spectrum. 5.6.1 The origins of paradises and Edens. Up until relatively recent times in human history, humans have been primarily fruitarians. To this day, in Java and other Malaysian islands, there are enclosures known as paradesas, where people live among fruit-bearing trees. The word paradise derives therefrom. All over Europe and much of the Far East, there were walled enclosures of heavy stone where people resided and tended orchards. These were called paradises or Edens. The walls kept out animals, helped capture and retain the sun's heat, and protected against winds and frosts. Many words with roots of ava and aval, such as Valhalla and Avalon, evolved from terms born of a fruit culture. Valhalla originally meant apple hole or a place where apples were stored. Avalon merely meant the land of apples. The cultivation of fruits had attained scientific status long before formal histories were kept. We know of them through folklore, legends, and the remains of the incredible stone walls of these Edens. 5.6.2 The origins of today's eating practices. If humans are natural fruitarians, how have they come to stray from their diet of their physiological adaptations? In nature, such animals as gorillas, cattle, and horses will die of starvation rather than eat flesh. But chimpanzees and some other fruit-eating animals will rend and eat another animal on occasion. Humans, in addition to being possessed of a strong survival instinct, possess extraordinary intelligence to employ in support of that instinct. About 3 to 4 million years ago, humans began wandering out of the homelands in tropical regions. In time, they peopled most of the earth accessible to them. Over the whole globe, according to geological records, climate was hospitable and favored their frugivorous habits. The remains of tropical plants have been found in Alaska and other northerly latitudes. Due to some cataclysmic event or events that resulted in cold and freezing temperatures and ice ages, humans in northerly climes retreated south. Those that remained had to survive on the fare available to them or perish. For a part, this meant meat and animal products. Humans had to learn providence against the seasons and to survive on the foods available in harsh seasons or disappear from the scene. This led to meat eating and to the use of non-fruit foods. These dietary perversions, born of necessity, became fixed in many peoples and gradually spread to people who had no necessity to resort to non-fruitarian diets. Despite this, many pockets of people throughout the world never deserted their natural fruit diet and remain fruitarians to this day. Even such a harsh seasonal climate as found at the 8,000-foot level in the Himalayas in northeast Pakistan has a fruitarian culture, that of the Hunzas. While the Hunzas do partake of some pulses and grains, theirs is particularly an eco-culture of orchards, and their dietary consists mostly of apples, apricots, and other fruits that thrive in the climate and growing season. The use of meat and animal products, grains, roots, and other non-fruitarian fare has arisen in relatively recent times in human history and undoubtedly originated in the adversity humans faced in certain climates, especially northern ones. The cultivation of grasses for grain is only a few thousand years old, perhaps less than 10,000. 5.6.3. A look at some diets over the world. If you were a Mongolian, you'd probably be a nomadic appendage to an animal flock. You'd have some vegetables, but for the most part, you'd fare on meats, cheeses, milks, and milk products. If you were among groups of people in tropical Brazil and other tropical cultures, you might live almost entirely on a banana diet, or breadfruit, or on some other fruit. The same might be true if you lived on many Pacific Islands or Indian Ocean cultures. If you lived in southern China, you might adopt a diet heavy in fruits, rice, and vegetables, whereas in northern China, you might adopt a diet heavy in fruits, soybeans, and vegetables. Eskimos and Laplanders live almost exclusively on animal fare, with the exception of some areas where fish is consumed extensively. Most Asian cultures are vegetarian and fruitarian. Most Asian countries have what is called a rice economy, though some Asian cultures utilize other grains and legumes as staples. Europeans, immediate ancestors for most Americans, are heavily into grain culture and make it a substantial part of their diet, though they also partake heavily of fruits and vegetables. Meat and animal products form but a small part of the diets of most Europeans. English-speaking people the world over are the heaviest meat eaters, with the exception of Argentinians and Finlanders. When we look at the world's healthiest people, we observe the Hunzas, Vilcabambians, Abkhazians, and other primarily fruitarian cultures. These people are healthy for more reasons than just fruit eating, however. They also live mostly in the outdoors, or rather, unstressful circumstances. Wherever you look at cultures and their dietary practices of long standing, you find that people have adopted as foods that which they can most easily cultivate and harvest in their regions. They fare well or do poorly in accord with the benefits or lack of it in their dietary. 5.6.4. Do different dietary habits change human physiology? Faculties usually require hundreds of thousands of years to develop. Who knows how many millions of years were required to develop human hands to the present stage? In some of our primate relatives, the hands have yet to reach the facile stage which humans have attained. Physiological changes are equally slow in coming about. Humans may eventually adapt to cooked foods and meats, just as jackals and buzzards adapted to the roles of scavengers of dead, rotting meats. But we might first become extinct. Many creatures have not survived drastic dietary changes. The weaknesses and diseased condition of most present-day humans is ample warning that our dietary is incorrect and death-dealing, with portents of disaster for that part of humanity that indulges in it. The environment of adaptations to new foods may not occur at all, or so slowly as to be of no good consequence. In view of the ecological and health benefits of fruit culture and its ease of cultivation, It behoves humans to stay with the diet that developed them into the magnificent creatures that they were, that some are, and all can be. By consuming fruits, we'll thrive and, at the same time, place a demand on the marketplace that will spur the development of orchards and even more fruit. 5.7. Negative nutrition, harmful foods and practices. 5.7.1. Condiments are drugs. 5.7.2. Cooking is pathogenic. 5.7.3. Processed, refined, and preserved foods. 5.7.4. Foods not suited to the human dietary. 5.7.5. Dietary follies of health seekers. 5.7.6. Drinking habits are damaging to health. Foods have varying degrees of beneficence in the human diet. They also have varying degrees of pathogenicity in the diet. Our finest foods are the raw materials of our nutritive processes. Our worst foods are vitality-sapping junk the body must struggle to contend with. 5.7.1. Condiments are drugs. Condiments are substances used to enhance or modify flavors and tastes. That could include sugar, lemon juice, salt, pepper, vinegar, onions, or anything else added to a dish to alter its flavor. In using the term today, we mean specifically pungent substances that are excitants, not whole foods that we'd eat liberally of for their own sake. If we cut up bananas and then mix in some diced mango, the flavor enhancement is really stunning. Yet, we would not refer to the mango as a condiment. It is a food that we could make a meal of for its own sake. Likewise, tomatoes and nuts or avocado added to a vegetable salad really give the salad zest. Yet we do not usually call tomatoes, nuts, or avocados condiments, for they are whole foods, any of which we can easily eat alone as a meal. Thus, condiments narrow down to those substances that are used exclusively and only to modify flavors. Vinegar, salt, pepper, basil, MSG, mint, sage, garlic, and hundreds of other herbs and substances are used only as excitants to the taste buds. There is one quality about all condiments that make them unfit for human diet. They are all pathogenic. As excitants or stimulants, they are inherently poisonous. The body has thousands of guardian angels. The fact that taste buds and other cells and senses of the mouth, esophagus, and stomach are put into a frenzy by certain substances is a warning. Accelerated functions and senses make us more aware of flavors in the foods condiments are combined with. But the excitation is a guardian faculty broadcasting an alarm. If you were trying to eat salt, pepper, or vinegar in and of itself, you wouldn't get very far. They have no food value at all and, in fact, are indigestible. And that's the key to the body's objection to them. Body senses can detect the difference between foods and non-foods. Foods are welcome, and those items which the body cannot utilize for lack of enzymes to digest them, or of an outright anti-vital character, the body becomes excited or stimulated as a response. Unfortunately, humans have become so perverted as to seek this excitement as an end in itself. Many, if not most people, are seeking kicks. Anything which the body treats as an anti-vital substance, anything which it cannot digest and use easily and efficiently, anything that presents problems by making chemical unions with body fluids and cells that excite and stimulate, are to be shunned. They all fulfill the definition of drugs, which is another name of poisons. Discontinuance of them by habituals begets withdrawal symptoms, just as occurs in deprived drug addicts. Nature seasons foods natural to our palates with all the taste-satisfying nutrients we require. Flavors galore abound in them. Artificial seasonings do not really enhance their taste. Only a perverted palate seeks the kicks and thrills that are unnatural to our dietary. 5.7.2 Cooking is pathogenic. Cooking creates diseases on several counts. The most salient are as follows. 1. Cooking deranges and destroys nutrients. To the extent that this occurs, we are denied needed vitamins, minerals, proteins, essential fatty acids, and other nutrient factors. 2. The deranged nutrients become, via cooking, unstable substances that are toxic in the system. This is readily evidenced by the doubling and tripling of the leukocyte count in the blood in half an hour to an hour after eating a meal of cooked foods. Any poison or drug taken into the body occasions the same body response. 3. The body must expend tremendously of its nerve and other energies to expel the offending substances of cooked foods and to clear itself of their contamination. Cooked food eaters have hangovers and withdrawal symptoms, just as do drinkers of coffee, tobacco smokers, or other drug addicts who forego their regular round of stimulation. The body cannot build really healthy cells and tissues with poor quality materials. That which must be cooked to be palatable is not worthy of the human diet. Cooking makes it less so. Shun cooked foods and guide your clients to raw foods. Living foods of our adaptation are the road to magnificent health, and anything less than the ideal results in development, growth, and functions that are less than ideal. Thus, cooked foods as articles of diet are pathogenic in that they poison us on one count and results in deficiencies on yet another count. 5.7.3 Processed, refined, and preserved foods. Anything used as food that is not in its original natural state has been tampered with. Processing is altering or preparing foods, or both. Refining means making finer, or reduction to a purer state. Thus, white flour is refined wheat. Though some chemical processes are used in making it white, essentially the process of refining the wheat flour is mechanically accomplished by milling. Refining sugar is the extraction of sugar from sugar cane or beets and, through cooking and chemical processes, obtaining sucrose. Preserving involves treating foods so that they will be usable for a much greater length of time than is normal in nature. The processing of foods involves anything that alters foods, including steps that do not alter them significantly or nutritionally. While the shelling and vacuum packing of nuts is processing, these processes do not detract from the value of the nuts. On the other hand, cooking fruits and adding sugar, preservative chemicals such as salt, etc., and then sealing them in cans and jars are very destructive processes. Drying the same fruits alters the fruits so that they can be preserved, but does not alter them so significantly that they are a liability to the human diet. Most processed foods in the marketplace are unsuitable in the human diet in the first place, before any alteration, refining, or preserving occurs. Examples of this are processed meats, refined cereals, pasteurized and homogenized milk, etc. Canned foods have a shelf life of years and years, but they are not acceptable in the human diet even if they were good foods prior to canning. They might be acceptable only against the reality of eating them or starving to death. If canned foods only are eaten, death is rather quick and certain. That happened to many who were involved in the great Alaska gold rush, to those who were involved in the digging of the Panama Canal, and to others in similar projects. This contrasts with excellent health that results from a diet of proper foods eaten in the raw state. Freezing is a method of preserving foods. Frozen foods are not as wholesome as fresh foods. The primary drawback is that the freezing bursts many cells and occasions degeneration due to oxidation. Freezing does not affect some foods at all, notably foods with low water content or very oily in texture. Dates, dried fruits, nuts, and seeds may be frozen and kept fresher. Dried fruits, though not as wholesome as their fresh counterparts, are wholesome. Nuts and seeds are well preserved by lack of moisture and air in their own shells. Vacuum packing and a nitrogen media do not harm many foods and preserve them with food values intact. Some foods are coated with paraffin, oils, waxes, and other preservatives. If these substances have not penetrated the protective skin or covering and can be readily removed, they are suitable for food if they meet other dietary criteria. Removal may be accomplished by a bath in a mild solution of hydrochloric acid, vinegar, Clorox, or even very warm water in some cases. If the solution is warm, it will be chemically more active and more readily unite with the oils, waxes, or paraffins. Moreover, the warmer the solution, the more likely waxes and paraffins are to liquefy. Processing, refining, and preserving are done commercially to give foods longer shelf life, to change their structure so as to make them marketable, to make them more palatable, to enhance flavors, or for a number of other reasons. However, refining renders foods deficient in one or more ways, even if they are suitable items of diet to start with. But the final result is in embalming foods with preservatives to protect their spoilage, bacterial degeneration, or oxidation. Preservatives are, one and all, poisonous. That is the character of a preservative. It must be an antibiotic, an antioxidant, or have some quality to maintain appearances of wholesomeness. Needless to say, that which is poisonous to bacteria is likewise poisonous to human cells. That which is poisonous interferes with digestion as much as do deranged portions of cooked foods. As a rule, steer away from preserved foods and give preference to fresh, ripe fruits and some vegetables, seeds, and nuts. Food processing is also done in the home as well as commercially, for, as stated earlier, it comprises anything done to alter foods from their original form. Cooking, grinding, chopping, cutting, peeling, and blending are all at-home food-altering processes. Of these, however, cooking is by far the most destructive of food's nutritional value and is, therefore, the primary at-home process to avoid or keep to a minimum. Even the other at-home processing should be limited to some extent. For example, you may serve juices sometimes, but whole fruits and vegetables most of the time. Or you may prepare cut-up salads sometimes, but serve whole fruits or vegetables most of the time. A larger portion of the nutrients are left intact in whole foods as a rule. One notable exception to this, however, is sesame seeds. Because they are so tiny, they normally do not get thoroughly masticated, even by very conscientious eaters. Therefore, grinding them and using them immediately may be a beneficial at-home process. Food preparation will be studied in depth in a future lesson. 5.7.4 Foods not suited to the human dietary. Any food that does not meet all the criteria heretofore cited is not a food of our natural adaptation. Foods of our adaptation meet our needs in every respect. Only fruits meet all our various needs. Humans would not survive very long on a total meat diet. Shorter yet would be our lives if we ate a meat diet that had been cooked. Well done. We can survive 2 or 3 times as long on our fat reserves as we can upon an exclusive diet of meat. The body lives very poorly on a protein diet, being only about 30% efficient in converting proteins into fuels, carbohydrates, our primary need. This compares with about 90% to 95% efficiency in converting the sugars of fruits into energy. Humans cannot live on condiments and seasonings, raw or cooked. Condiments are used for their poison content, not for their nutrient content. Nor are we physiologically equipped to live on milk or milk products, eggs, fish, or other animal products. Also, we are not suited to handle a diet heavy in fats and proteins, even if they are consumed totally raw. Something most unlikely in our society, because it can abide unnatural foods only if denatured by cooking. We need fats and proteins only in small amounts. Larger amounts are a toxic burden, tax our digestive systems, and use up too much vital energy. Humans cannot live on herbs in the current frame of reference because they, like condiments, are toxic and do not possess food values for the most part. Vegetables or plants fair as leaves, stalks, stems, grasses, etc., cannot comprise the mainstay of the human dietary because we cannot obtain our caloric needs from these types of foods. Few vegetables appeal to the palate as such anyway. Some vegetables, notably lettuce, are prized because of their relative sweetness and texture. Chlorophyll is normally bitter, and we're turned off by bitter substances. Our natural foods appeal to our senses, and none appeal to our senses as do fruits, a sure indication that fruits are our natural preference because of natural adaptation. In the cooked state, vegetables appeal more because of the conversion of their starches to dextrin, a form of sugar. A diet consisting almost entirely of oily foods is not suited to our needs. We can utilize a small amount of oil with benefit. This need can be met incidentally to primarily carbohydrate fare. Oily foods are handled very slowly. Digestion usually takes 4 to 6 hours. While oils are highly concentrated sources of calories, the body cannot make use of them with the faculty it uses, monosaccharides. Those who eat heavily of nuts and oily fruits exhibit problems that are not as healthy and vigorous as those on primary carbohydrate fare. There are groups of people who practically exist on coconuts, but they are eaten at a stage when the oils have not been formed to any extent. The coconuts are still primarily carbohydrates. Starches also comprise an incidental part of our diet. We cannot survive on an exclusive diet of raw starches. First, we have a very limited capacity to digest raw starches. In light of this capacity, we cannot meet our needs for fuels and other nutrients on a raw starch diet. Secondly, most starches are contained in microglobules of cellulose that neither chewing nor digestion will break down. Hence, we are not naturally equipped to eat raw starches, as are birds with crawlers or animals that have a plethora of starch-splitting enzymes. Our ability to utilize grains, tubers, and other starchy foods relies upon the agency of cooking. However, some of these foods, notably the turnip, rutabaga, sweet potato, carrots, and others, can be utilized raw only because of their sugar content. The traditional potato is entirely unsuitable, being repulsive to normal tastes when raw. Raw grains are repulsive to normal tastes for the same reason. We reject starch foods naturally with our natural equipment that evaluates foods beneath a conscious level. We can force ourselves to eat these foods and can pervert ourselves to the point we value them just as we value condiments and drugs. But this is contrary to our nature, not in accord with it. Humans cannot utilize milk in its raw or cooked state. Raw, we do not have the enzymes, renin, which ceases to be secreted in humans at about age 3, the proper weaning age, to break down casein, with which milk proteins, calcium, and other nutrients are bound. At about the same age, we lose the ability to secrete lactase, an enzyme that reduces lactose, the milk sugar, to monosaccharides. Therefore, most of our people are said to be lactose intolerant. We cannot utilize fermented milk products because lactic acid and putrefaction byproducts are toxic to humans, just as they are to the bacteria that secreted fermentation byproducts as bacterial defecation. There are very few products of bacterial activity that we can use. Vitamin B12 is a notable exception. Humans cannot live well on exclusive vegetarian fare, even if it includes fruits referred to as vegetables, such as tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, eggplants, squashes, pumpkins, etc. Foods that must be cooked are third- and fourth-rate foods and should form no part of the dietary. Only the stark reality of being deprived for inordinately long periods of proper foods should force us to eat foods that are less than ideal in the diet. 5.7.5 Dietary follies of health seekers. Seeking out wholesome organic foods free of unnatural fertilization and pesticides is most laudable, but it is relatively meaningless and ineffective if a person then proceeds to take organic food and cook them. Much of the advantage is wiped out. Organically grown foods are always superior to their non-organic counterparts, undergoing the same amount of processing, cooking, etc. But it is preferable health-wise to eat conventional produce uncooked than organic produce in a cooked state. Many health seekers believe food supplements are necessary because we have deficient soils. We do not have truly deficient soils, as they would not produce foods that require the minerals in which they are deficient. We have many soils, even in their virgin state, that are deficient in something or other that makes them unsuitable for certain plants or trees. We have many soils that have lost the capacity of growing corn, potatoes, wheat, and other staples, but which will still grow grasses and legumes. These soils can be built up very quickly if certain minerals are judiciously added using organic methods. The deficient soil, deficient food complex is fostered among health seekers by fractionated food purveyors who are peddling a synthetic manufactured supplement, or so-called natural supplements, both of which are far inferior to whole foods. Supplements can in no way make good any partial deficiency that may exist. These synthetic supplements are not usable in any circumstances, and the body treats them as drugs. It is the stimulus of drug effects that we mistake for health effects. We make the energy an exhausted horse shows under the whip as beneficent when, in fact, it is pathogenic. Even if part of the supplements are obtained from organic sources, as a fraction of a given supplement, say 5 to 10% only, so they can be represented as natural. They are also worthless if extracted entirely from organic sources. The body uses nutrients in context with other nutrients as a team. The shameful reality is that these supplements are obtained, as a rule, from the same products grown on the same deficient soils about which they warn us. Health seekers often buy waste products that are sold as health products. An example of this is the beer manufacturer's waste product, brewer's yeast. Another example is the waste product of sugar manufacturers, molasses, which is a totally unsuitable and harmful product. Some health seekers buy or have bought the wastes of other manufacturers too, especially the wastes of cheese manufacturers and meat processors. Whey, liver, gelatin, and other wastes are thought to be healthful when, in reality, they are worse than worthless. Many health seekers also buy minerals from unusable sources. Many drink seawater, eat sea salt, drink hard mineralized waters, eat molasses, dolomite, and/or take mineral supplements. All these contain inorganic minerals which are not only not suitable by the body, but which harm it grievously. In seeking health, many people fall victim to pathogenic practices foisted upon them in the name of health. Many health seekers are likely to, or do, fall victim to alternate schemes of drugging. They are often persuaded to take a multitude of herbs and toxic plants because they are supposed to cure or prevent disease. Molasses and other waste products are also touted as medications. However, the truth is that health is built only by healthful practices. Diseases do not have to be prevented, for the body will not initiate and conduct diseases unless the need exists. If everyone discontinued those practices that pollute their bodies, there would be no occasion for disease. In any event, so-called medication can never help and will only cause further harm to the body. Among the many pernicious plants and herbs touted as healthful because of their toxin content, not their food content, are onions, garlic, comfrey, aloe, cayenne peppers, mints, and innumerable others. In seeking health, many concerned individuals end up further polluting their bodies, thus creating more disease. 5.7.6 Drinking habits are damaging to health. Humans are not naturally drinking animals, for we have no natural equipment for the practice. Drinking is done artificially with the aid of tools. Our natural diet is usually water sufficient. In addition, drinking as practiced today is almost totally pathogenic. Drinking pure, distilled water is not pathogenic, but substances which occasion its drinking are usually pathogenic. Sometimes, of course, extraordinary heat and/or vigorous activity lay the basis for drinking pure water. Most drinking is of poisoned drinks. Sugared and flavored drinks are toxic, as are coffees, cocoas, sodas, beers, wines, whiskies, teas of all kinds, etc. Even fruit and vegetable juices are far less than ideal because they represent fragmented rather than whole foods. Most drinking amounts to drug habits rather than acts supplying needed water. It bears reiterating that almost all drinking is pathogenic. 5.8 A survey of unconventional dietetic schools and their fallacies. 5.8.1 The macrobiotic school. 5.8.2 Supplementation and special foods. 5.8.3 Herbs used as alternate medications. 5.8.4 The vegetarians. 5.8.5 The Bircher-Benner school. 5.8.6 The mucusless diet. 5.8.7 The Varlanders. 5.8.8 The fruitarians. 5.8.9 The natural hygienists. 5.8.10 Foods as Medicines. 5.8.11 The Juice Therapy School. 5.8.12 The Blended Salad Diet. 5.8.13 Conclusion. There are many schools of thought concerning the content of the human diet. We have viewed conventional eating, which embraces the concept of the four basic food groups. Other schools are called macrobiotic, vegetarian, fruitarian, vegan, and yet others. Let's take a brief look at some of these one by one. 5.8.1 The Macrobiotic School. This school was founded by George Oshawa, a native of Japan. The emphasis is on a so-called perfect diet, consisting mainly of cooked rice, along with some cooked vegetables. Such a heavy diet of cooked rice provides primarily fuel, carbohydrates, but carbohydrates from cooked food also render the toxic byproducts of heat degeneration. Very few fruits are included in this diet, and while the macrobiotic diet is a great improvement over conventional diets on many counts, it is far from ideal. Even a brief discussion of the macrobiotic diet would be incomplete without the mention of the concepts of yin and yang. These concepts represent many sets of qualities, such as acid and alkaline, sweet and salty, and hot and cold. Without going into the subject, suffice it to say that in macrobiotics, determinations of wholesome foods are made based on this yin-yang concept. 5.8.2 Supplementation and Special Foods. This might well be called the mega vitamin or mega feeding school. Even though the only way to render a deficient diet adequate is to eat a diet adequate in natural nutrient factors, this school goes beyond that. They say that if it's a good thing, there is no such thing as too much. For example, the RDA for vitamin C may be 60 milligrams daily. People in this school, such as Dr. Linus Pauling, advocate up to 10,000 milligrams daily. If 4,000 international units of vitamin A are the RDA, the mega vitamin people advocate 100,000 to 200,000 units daily. However, the body cannot use more than it needs, and it must excrete that which is in excess of needs. But the massiveness of the dosage is just one aspect of the harm wreaked by the supplementation advocates. The synthetic products that dominate the market are treated as outright drugs by the body. Even if the supplements were extracted entirely from natural sources, they'd still be unusable. The body uses foods, not individual nutrients. It uses them synergistically as nature puts them up, not as extracted or laboratory synthesized and compounded in imitation of nature. 5.8.3 Herbs used as alternative medicines. Some health seekers eat poisonous plants daily in the belief that they need medicines for health. Entrepreneurs harvest weeds from the wilds and from cultivated fields by the hundreds of tons for people who believe in natural medicines. Herbs are not consumed for their nutrients, and none could be consumed as foods in themselves. Death could result from an overdose if too much of these were eaten as a food. People have died on rather small amounts of some herbs. 5.8.4 The Vegetarians. There are about 25 million people in this country who eat only fruits and vegetables or who consume either what is known as an ovo or lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. Vegetarians who eat no animal foods whatsoever are called vegans. Lacto-vegetarians include dairy foods in their diet. Ovo-vegetarians include eggs but not dairy products, and lacto-ovo vegetarians include both eggs and dairy foods in their diet. Many, if not most, vegetarians are ethical vegetarians, but this is especially so with the vegans, as they refuse to cause suffering to animals. Vegetarians may eat lots of cooked foods, or they may consume an all-raw or almost all-raw diet. Many, if not most, vegetarians use herbs, especially if they are vegetarians for, or partly for, health reasons. Some vegans are natural hygienists. The common bond of vegans is non-exploitation of animals. Vegetarians generally are healthier than the population at large, for while many of their practices are not harmful per se, they are less harmful than those of conventional eaters. Some vegetarians will eat just about any kind of non-animal food, even alcohol beverages, really drugs and not foods, and junk foods, also more like drugs than foods in the system. These people are vegetarians, not for health reasons, but for moral reasons relating to the killing of animals. However, most people who are vegetarians are more health-oriented than non-vegetarians. 5.8.5 The Bircher-Benner School. This school is essentially a vegetarian school that is heavily on grains with some fruits. 5.8.6 The Mucusless Diet. The founder of this school, Arnold Ehret, reasoned that anything which results in mucus formation is unhealthy. This reasoning is correct, for anything that causes the system to secrete mucus is an indication that toxic or unwelcome materials are in the organism. Ehret thought that the foods themselves formed mucus, however, when, in fact, the organism creates the mucus in response to unwelcome foods. Through trial and error, Ehret discovered that a diet of non-oily fruits and some vegetables built high-level health and function and did not result in mucus formation. Thus he called his diet the mucusless diet. 5.8.7 The Verlanders. Ebba Verland of Sweden spent most of her life studying the touchstones of health. He was greatly influenced by the Bircher-Benner school and advanced their dietary philosophy to include more fresh, raw vegetables and fruits. However, though he still advocated the use of various grains, he recommended they be prepared in a more conservative manner. In many of his teachings, Verland added to the science of nutrition and health and paralleled the teachings of the natural hygienist. As a worldwide traveler and a deep student, he undoubtedly was well acquainted with the philosophy and practice of natural hygiene and added to his own system those features he liked. Especially did he advocate fasting as a course to follow during illness and in good health as a health measure. 5.8.8 The Fruitarians. There are relatively few raw food fruitarians, but there is much interest in fruitarianism and sentiment for it. Humans are naturally frugivores, and there is a sound basis for fruitarianism. But except for the most ardent of fruitarians, most are likely to eat some nuts and vegetables. Many fruitarians are natural hygienists, though many natural hygienists are not fruitarians. The primary difference between the fruitarians and the fruit-eating hygienists is that many fruitarians do not adhere to principles of compatible food combining. Raw food fruitarianism is a fast burgeoning element in our society, though, as yet, their numbers are only in the thousands. 5.8.9 The Natural Hygienists. This dietary school embraces many divergent outlooks on dietary fare. All hygienists advocate a mostly raw diet of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and sprouts, although some advocate the eating of cheese and raw egg yolks. Some hygienists advocate complex carbohydrates as important items of fare. They feel that conservatively cooked rice, squashes, potatoes, yams, and other starches are good in the diet if eaten in conjunction with hearty vegetable salads. Likewise, they are often heavy eaters of nuts and avocados if consumed in conjunction with a hearty salad of green leafy vegetables and some fruit fare, popularly considered vegetables. Hygienists originate and fostered the concepts of practices of food combining. Also, they advocate regimes in which diet comprises only a part. As a life scientist, you'll also call yourself a natural hygienist, for these are identical philosophies. But the dietary score has yet to be settled in practice, although many hygienists are idealistically raw fruitarians. It is our endeavor in this course to present data sufficient to settle the score for you. Even the last healthful hygienic diet is such a great improvement over conventional diets that those who adopt it must improve their health. Although no one is so far down the road of life that they cannot improve dramatically upon the adoption of the hygienic regime, even if they adopt a less than ideal version of it. As a health professional, you must keep in mind that anything less than ideal begets less than ideal results. But on the other hand, every improvement you inspire in your clients will result in corresponding improvement in well-being. 5.8.10 Foods as Medicines. Like the herbal school, which looks upon herbs as medicines, this school tries to employ foods as therapeutic tools. There are those who swear by the use of raw egg yolks. There are those who swear by blended salads, often with egg yolk. Many look upon fruits as cleansing foods. A multitude of foods are taken with the idea that they will prevent or cure diseases. We must repeat that foods are raw materials which the organism acts upon. They have no actions of their own, much less cleansing and healing abilities. 5.8.11 The Juice Therapy School. This school advocates a diet heavy in or consisting primarily of juices extracted from fruits and vegetables. It was founded nearly a century ago, and Benedict Lust was one of its luminaries. Today, N.W. Walker is perhaps its most articulate exponent. Juices are fractionated foods subject to oxidative deterioration. Oxidation occurs quickly. For example, orange juice can lose up to 60% of its vitamin C within an hour after juicing. Iron is oxidized very quickly in all foods. This may be observed visually if an apple is broken open and exposed to air. Oxidation creates toxic byproducts. An example of this is cooking, which is a much accelerated process of oxidation as well as heat degeneration. Juices are not whole foods. Many valuable nutrients are lost in the pulp. Further, those who drink their foods are often guilty of consuming inordinate amounts of it to secure satiety. While we can safely partake of several pounds of watermelon and like amounts of some juices, there are other juices that a few pounds of constitutes far too much food. Carrot juice drinkers are notorious overeaters. Nature did not furnish humans with juices outside of those implicit in chewing. 5.8.12 The Blended Salad Diet. There is a small school that believes that blended salads 3 times a day are beneficial in human dietary. While blending involves the whole food, It still has the objection of oxidation and enzymic degeneration. Blended foods are never as tasty as their whole counterparts, even if eaten immediately after blending, because enzymes and oxygen degenerate foods and destroys their goodness so quickly. 5.8.13 Conclusion. As you can see, there are many different schools of thought on diet and nutrition. The macrobiotic school is based on the concept of yin and yang and is rooted in the Oriental tradition. Vegetarian diets are based either on the ethics of killing animals or on the unhealthfulness of meat. And for some vegetarians, dairy foods and/or eggs, or both. The mucusless diet is determined by which foods do and don't result in mucus formation in the body, and the herbalists and food as machine schools base their diets on the supposed curative properties of foods. However, the only diet that is totally based on sound physiological principles, that is based on science and not on tradition, is the natural hygienic diet, which is the same as the life science diet. Some hygienists and fruitarians, most are vegans and all are vegetarians, oftentimes individually adopt and popularize diets that reflect their own individual ideas and experiences with diet, and the best of these diets have some commonalities with the hygienic diet. The diet of the natural hygienist is the only one that is particularly concerned with food combining, and this aspect of the diet is not only unique, but it is based on physiological principles. 5.9 The physiological necessity of proper food combining. 5.9.1 The chemical character of digestion and the rules it decrees. 5.9.2 Differing digestive times dictate selectively in food combinations. 5.9.3 Character of food determines suitability in diet. One of the cardinal principles around which natural hygiene / life science is built in dietary practices is that of food combining when more than one food is eaten at a meal. Humans are capable of digesting with great ease a single food of their adaptation. However, when more than one food is consumed at a meal, the foods thus combined must be compatible in their digestive chemistry. If the digestion of a meal's various items requires differing digestive tasks, digestion will suffer. Digestion may be retarded and vitiated whether or not we are aware of it, whether we suffer the discomforts of indigestion or fail to feel them. Indigestion may be suffered beneath the level of awareness for decades before its debilitating effects show up as diseases and symptoms. On the other hand, the sufferer may be keenly aware of distresses resulting from indigestion on practically a meal-to-meal basis. The ill effects of wrong eating and improper food combining are commonly treated with a raft of drugs, primarily antacid drugs such as Terns, Rolaids, bicarbonate of soda, poisonous aluminium preparations, milk of magnesia, and so on. 5.9.1 The chemical character of digestion and the rules it decrees. Further along in this course, a complete lesson is devoted to food combining. The physiology of digestion recognizes that different foods present dissimilar digestive tasks. For instance, protein foods require an acid medium for digestion. Pepsin, the protein digestive enzyme, requires an acid gastric secretion, more specifically, hydrochloric acid. Starchy foods, on the other hand, require an alkaline medium to enable the enzymes of salivatory amylase, ptyalin, to perform their digestive tasks. Below a pH of 4, starch digestion is totally suspended. Pepsin will not break down proteins at a pH higher than 3. Thus, starchy foods and protein foods are incompatible in digestive chemistry. From this physiological fact of life emerges this feeding rule. Do not eat a protein food and a starchy food at the same meal. There are many foods that do not combine with others. It is the practice of many to eat oils and sugars together. Sugars undergo no digestion in the stomach, and melons and sweet fruits may stay in the stomach as little as 10 minutes or remain for as long as 30 to 40 minutes. They are expelled rather quickly and absorbed very quickly from the small intestine. Oils remain in the stomach for several hours for processing before being forwarded to the small intestine for further elaboration. If eaten with fruits, they hold up the sugars and fermentation is likely to occur, thus vitiating the meal. 5.9.2 Differing digestive times dictate selectivity in food combinations. Even different fruits have different digestive tasks. The body readily digests acid fruits, and it also readily digests sweet fruits. But acids must first be changed and become alkaline before absorption can occur. This involves some delay in the stomach. Any delay in the stomach of a sweet fruit may dispose to fermentation. Thus again, combining foods improperly may vitiate digestion and contribute to physiological problems immediately and down the road if unhealthy physiological practices continue. Sweet fruits have their own digestive characteristics. Watermelon is perhaps the fastest digested of sweet fruits. Other melons are passed through the stomach quickly, too, but bananas, grapes, and apples may remain in the stomach for 2 or 3 times as long. Hence, if bananas, apples, or grapes are eaten with melon, fermentation and upset stomach may result. 5.9.3 Character of food determines suitability in diet. Humans are adapted to a narrow spectrum of the world's foods, just as they are most other animals. Our anatomy and physiology are highly specialized to handle efficiently the fruit foods of the earth. We have developed limited capabilities to digest oils, proteins, and starches, but under no circumstances are we primarily protein eaters, starch eaters, or oil eaters. Inasmuch as some 85% to 90% of our diet by dry weight is for the purpose of fueling our body, it behoves us to eat primarily foods that mostly efficiently furnish our fuel requirements. Inasmuch as foods of our natural adaptation furnish this ratio of fuel values relative to other necessary nutrient factors within their context, we can most healthfully devote ourselves to a raw fruitarian regime. Many, including a great number of hygienists, will object to the all-fruit diet and cite supposed dangers that fruits are inadequate in the needs of life, especially proteins, essential fatty acids, mineral salts, and vitamins. Thus, they advocate green leaves and other vegetables, seeds and nuts, and even cheese. They condemn the more is better school, yet tend to side with them in practice. Close scrutiny of our physiological character decrees that we eat sparingly of non-fruit foods. It is erroneous to assume that the fruit diet is deficient in the needs of life, as will be demonstrated in other lessons. 5.10 Nutritional miscellany. The body supposedly uses 11 calories per day per pound of weight for metabolic purposes only. Hunza men who have superb physiques and perform labor that would exhaust our best on a daily basis have a total intake of only about 1,900 calories per day, about 12 calories per pound of weight. There must be some terribly wrong calculations here, or else the needs of healthy individuals for fuel values is far below our diseased average. In Vilcabamba, caloric intake is lower yet, being only about 8 to 10 calories per pound of weight per day. The average caloric intake there is about 1,350 calories per day. The Peruvians of Vilcabamba work hard on their gardens and fields, as do the Hansas. The work these two groups of people do would require, according to our nutritionists, from 3,500 to 7,000 calories a day. Something is amiss. In dealing with your clients, you'll keep these facts in mind. The less feeding, down to a point, the more efficient the body is. This is even true if you're feeding highly efficient fruits rather than very inefficient meats and other high-protein fat foods that dominate in our American diets. Keep in mind that our high-powered dairy, poultry, cereal, and meat industries have a heavy bias in having our populace consume as much of their products as possible. Perhaps they have influenced the RDAs so that people are pushed to overeat on their products.